Endrody, CEO of Maid, Marian Entertainment, and we're basically a very small cottage industry MMO shop based out of Vancouver. We have a number of games that we run through our portal, maidmarian.com, and most recently sherwoodDungeon.com. The most popular game is a game called Sherwood Dungeon, which is call it a casual fantasy MMO. Historically, up to today, it's been advertising. Actually, very traditional banner-based advertising that we run directly underneath the games themselves. This started out as a hobby for a number of years, and really the idea of running ads underneath it was just done as an experiment initially, but then over time, it grew to a point where the ad revenue was actually better than how I was doing on my day job. So basically, at that point, I decided to go it on my own. And 6 months later, my wife Marian joined me as the CFO, and so we've basically been running the ad model since then. And basically, we're about to get into the RMT model. We're introducing virtual pets into the game and mounts. So these are horses, wolves, dragons, those types of things that you can purchase in the game for your character and for a period of time. So actually, you can for $5 you can buy a dragon for a year, for example, that kind of thing. Part of the challenge was to come up with something that didn't have a dramatic impact on gameplay. So although mounts do give you a movement bonus in the world, it doesn't necessarily give a player who doesn't have a mount an advantage, let's say in PvP, with a player who does have a mount. So I wanted them to be functional but limited in terms of their functionality. The majority of the reason I chose pets is because it's just cool to have a pet. So if you've got a wolf, he'll help you out in combat, but he doesn't do nearly the same damage necessarily that you do. But there's a coolness factor to be able to run around with a wolf at your side, right? I announced it to the community, the player community, 2 months ago because it was a major change for us because we're going from an advertising model to a RMT model. Actually, we're not switching, we're adding this on. I needed to talk to them gently over a period of time, and luckily the way Sherwood has grown up and the other games have grown up, I have a very good connection with the player community, so they recognize that this is a game that I wrote, and I'm able to say this is what I'm planning on doing over the next little while, and this is why. And generally, the initial response has been well received, but we'll see. Once I launch the pets next week, we'll find out if there's some issues associated with them. I'm expecting some, but I'm very hopeful that it'll work out for the best. Well, we wanted to maintain the easy entry approach. The ability to basically go in, type your name, enter the world without requiring you to register or sign up for it. And so that remains, and that is the sort of default way into the game. But in Sherwood, what we've added is an account system to the game that you can opt into. So, for example, obviously, if we're doing something like selling pets, we need to associate that with an account that we're maintaining on our servers. So, for those players who are interested in purchasing pets, they will need to sign up for a full account. And we've got some interesting. We launched the accounts in May because we've been doing this sort of in a staged approach, and working all of the bugs out of the system in terms of getting that end of the system working. And one of the things that I found surprising is that about 50% of the player base decided to sign up for accounts. That was actually lower I anticipated. But it's surprising the number of repeat players that will come back time after time and continue to sign as a guest, and they're happy to play that way, right? But it's been a fun process. We're still, I guess we're at about 1.7 million uniques a month for the overall site, and Sherwood on its own is a little over 1 million. Yeah. We had early in the year we had CPM levels that were quite strong. They dropped off about 50% around Christmas, and then they worked their way back up again. We did a number of things to combat that when it happened. We opened up our traffic to other sources, because consistently we found we've been able to get better CPMs through Google than through any of the other ad providers, and through that period, the other ad providers, as a result of Google dropping off 50%, all of a sudden they look pretty attractive. So we did start to develop relationships with a number of other ad providers that actually worked out fairly well. Well, I'm taking baby steps on this. So initially, we're launching through PayPal. So, and that has a certain number of countries that it supports fairly well. Thankfully, one of them is Poland, and we've been very, very successful with Sherwood through Poland and Brazil. So there's been a number of different sort of geographical areas around the world that, although we're not localized into a lot of other languages, we still been able to do quite well in. Really, that comes down to our distribution method. The fact that we work with these game sites who are able to basically put our game on their site for free as long as they show our ad. It really comes down to the efforts that the game site themselves are putting into in order to promote these. So in our case, we got lucky that we had some couple of strong Polish game sites that started pushing the game quite heavily, and we've thus established a certain popularity in Poland. Well, part of the advantage about using this distribution model where we share revenue in this natural way is that our position has always been that it's better to use many smaller than larger portals that will require sort of some exclusivity associated with it. It also becomes much more manageable because of the way we split the revenue, simply by saying, we'll show we've got the ad under the game. You're free to monetize the other ad, that's the other space that's on the page. So as a result, what's happened is that no one site represents more than 3.5% of traffic. So we're not vulnerable to a lot of anybody cutting us off necessarily. The reason I selected it originally was I got involved in the beta in, I guess it would have been 98, 99, somewhere around that, where they introduced 3D into Shockwave. And I just come through, if you remember the VRML days, when basically that was sort of one of the first 3D web-based efforts that was out there. And that fell apart and it didn't work out. And I kind of expected to see that if somebody was going to break into this, web 3D space, it would have to be a corporate interest. And so when I saw Macromedia, picking up and getting into 3D, I figured, the first person to do this is going to become a standard awfully quick. It didn't turn out to be quite as successful as I imagined, but nevertheless, I guess we're talking close to 10 years later now. Shockwave still has about a 59% install base, and so in terms of 3D goes, it's the closest thing to a standard we have. All right. So we're still, that 13 to 17 range is probably one of the best areas that we're in. We have for a fantasy MMO, we have an unusual number of women. The Sherwood Amazons Guild, and there's a number of I think we're close to 40% women as far as the game goes. And I think that's primarily because the game goes from it's not a highly intensely competitive game. It is very social, but it still has all of the major fantasy elements. So I kind of describe it as being a social MMO in a fantasy setting. Right? We have. The pet release is coming now, and we've had the introduction of accounts. This enables a whole bunch of other social features that we're hoping to add to the game over the next year or so. And included in there, we use a lot of procedurally generated content in the game to create islands and those types of things. And so what we want to do is potentially, if I can find a way, so I'm not promising anything, but potentially I want to see if there's a way to hand some of those tools off to our users to be able to create some islands or spaces for themselves. Yeah.